Today, I will be reading your Warhammer and Wargaming opinions and telling you whether you are right or wrong. Okay, so maybe I can't be the arbiter of truth, opinions are often subjective, but it still makes me feel better to imagine myself as some sort of future judge engaged in a war against bad opinions, determining the fate of commenters on the spot based upon my ultimately arbitrary rule set. I would be called Judge Disquiet? Basically a TO for thought. Boy, wouldn't the world be a better place for that? Maybe not. But aside from that power fantasy, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to go through your unpopular opinions on both Wargaming and Warhammer? Something which I asked in a YouTube post a month ago. Time is the thief of joy. And I got 264 responses, so I'm not going to be able to go through them all. Maybe I'll do a part 2 at some stage. There has also been quite a lot of repeats, and I've also realized that there's a lot of unpopular opinions that are not really that unpopular. But let's hit a few. Leech Millifee 4 says, Wargaming isn't amazingly suited for intense competitive play. It's easy to get bogged down in fiddly measurements and maneuvers, as well as rules interpretations. So I do agree with this. I think that wargames are very messy. They often have a fuzzy quality to them. The act of moving a miniature via measuring tape adds an element of inconsistency. Rules like line of sight can be incredibly subjective. So everything feels very loose in a lot of ways. And that's not helped by the fact that there's a lot of war games out there where the rules are, shall we say, a little bit ill-defined. Some of them are pretty incomplete, to be honest, so you kind of have to intuit your way to an answer. At least the smaller companies can get away with the fact that it's usually just one guy writing the rules in his bedroom. I find it hard to believe that some of the stuff that comes out of Games Workshop actually is play tested at all, to be honest. But overall, at its foundation, there are ways to tighten up a rule set to reduce variance. So for example, Star Wars has a movement gadget gizmo tool thing. I don't know what it's called. And that can help keep movement a little bit more consistent, but not really in practice. Dead Zone uses a cube system for movement, so you don't move inches, you move into another cube. You move from cube to cube to cube. That really speeds up play, but also leaves open the use of cover. And of course, there's also games that use grid-based systems as well, so how you move is very clear to everybody. But I do think that for me personally, I will always prefer using just a measuring tape and inches. I would like that in a miniature war game. Even if it is fiddly, it is fun to feel like General Melchett who's pushing across the little soldiers around the board. Bah! The freeform nature of mini war games is often what separates them from board games to me. And I will say that for this reason, miniature war games work best when entered into in a spirit of generosity by both players. This can be tough to do in very intense competitive games, and I think that's partly why we're seeing the rise of cooperative games in my opinion. No one is really incentivized to cheat or try to take advantage of a lot of the subjectivity that's inherent in mini war games in those circumstances. And if you are cheating, I guess you're doing that against an AI rather than a friend. I mean, no one's gonna stop you. The police aren't gonna break in for that. They will arrest you if you steal Steve Buscemi's shoes though. 400 DrunkenRabbit says, I want to see the Eastern Kingdoms in Warhammer Old World when it's introduced, or at least an Asian flavored Blood Bowl team. Is this unpopular? I feel like lots of people would love for Cathay to be introduced to the Old World. I personally would too. I think it would be awesome. I think they would fit in really well. I actually think the Creative Assembly kind of got the tone right. I think there are some elements that are very fantastical. Same with Kislev as well. But I think overall, I do think they slot in okay. And yeah, I'd be happy for the same for Blood Bowl. If there was some sort of Asian-inspired Blood Bowl team, I think that's super cool. More variety is always great. So long as the central tone of a game is intact, I love variety. Hey Discourse, I work for Games Workshop, but I can't afford the prices. I want to play Star Wars Legion, but if I Google it, they said they'll make an example of me. What can I do? Oh no, anonymous commenter, that's awful. Luckily, there is a solution, and that's today's sponsor, NordVPN. Check them out at nordvpn.com/discoursemen. This is the best VPN in my opinion. It's the one that I use. It's super easy, literally a single click and you get protection from nosy managers and angry dogs. It's super fast too. I use mine to stream American Netflix in HD with no lag while I'm painting miniatures. But the biggest advantage has to be as a shield against reactive pricing. Have y'all heard of this? Companies now track your internet history in order to determine the optimal amount of money to charge you. Seriously. Y'all know it's only a matter of time before Games Workshop get their grubby little hands on this technology. So I use NordVPN in order to confine my trackers. And they have granted me the power to offer you an exclusive deal that comes with a bonus month of coverage. Just head to nordvpn.com/discoursmin for your exclusive deal. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so that means there is zero risk to you. You know, unless your manager does indeed catch you playing Star Wars Legion at the local game store. So Godspeed, my anonymous commenter. Godspeed. Next up, we have Silent Ghost, who says, I'm new to the hobby. I love YouTube content, but get really tired of all these people getting free merchandise that is outrageously priced, all saying how great it is, and never giving a negative opinion about it. Thanks so much for your honest opinions. Well, no, thank you, Silent Ghost, for being a silent watcher of the night. I appreciate you. So historically, this has been a big problem in a lot of industries and media that covers it, not just in tabletop. And in a lot of ways, many, I guess, YouTubers, content creators, they act like reviewers, right? Like they review content. They've taken over in a lot of ways from traditional journalism, traditional media, which means that there's not a lot of regulations around it. It means that there's not a lot of guidelines. Basically, the rule is you just gotta say if you've been given the product for free or if it's sponsored. I obviously, for example, on this channel, if anything ever gets paid for, I say, right? I'm always very explicit in that something is being paid for. And so just to attack this from the bottom up, reviewers do need early access, they do need early copies of products, and they do need to be free, honestly. It makes sense, right? So in order to review something, you need to have it. You need to actually have the product. Often these products can be very expensive to buy. So for example, on this channel, I don't cover the Games Workshop physical box. I don't do like an unboxing or review the actual physical product, right? Because long ago, I had to make the decision of whether or not I was going to do that or not. And with the prices of Games Workshop products, they are far too expensive to buy. Like it would literally kill my channel to try and cover every single box. And I'm not going to sign an NDA with Games Workshop either. I mean, I think that my opinions on the Games Workshop NDA is pretty publicized. So I just can't cover it. But if I was someone who really wanted to cover the Games Workshop products, then I would probably need to sign that NDA and I would need to get those products. This is a big problem, especially when there is an expectation of certain editorial perspectives to be displayed by those reviewers from the companies providing the products in the first place, or the products that are being reviewed. So for example, they might expect favorable reviews in order to get access to future products. And often it's not getting the product for free that will sway people, it's getting early access to the product that will sway people, because for reviewers, oftentimes all that matters is that you are first to the punch. If you're the first person out there with a review, then you'll do really well. You gotta be the firstest with the mostest. So this creates a perverse incentive for reviewers, for content creators to work alongside companies. And another aspect to this that I think really particularly concerns YouTubers rather than traditional companies, rather than traditional reviewers, is that oftentimes YouTubers are fans, right? They are fans, and they may be fans of just a single game or a single manufacturer. That is tough because oftentimes those YouTubers have hooked their own personal brands into the success of a specific product. So to give you an example, if on this channel all I covered was Necromunda, then I have a personal stake in the success of Necromunda. If Necromunda gets more popular, if more people are playing Necromunda, then my channel will be more successful, or has a chance to be more successful. Whereas conversely, if nobody likes Necromunda and it sucks, which I'm beginning to realize it does, I'm sorry, then in that case, I'm just not going to get as many views. So it's in my interests to hype people up, to big up the game. So this is something that I think YouTubers, content creators need to be really diligent about, especially if they are covering a single system. I mean, personally, I believe that it's fine for fan channels to exist. I think that is totally fine. I understand the role and purpose of them. But if you're a fan channel and you're going to review content, then you really need to maintain a critical perspective. And I'm not 100% sure that it really is totally possible to be super critical. But all that said, I do understand the need for review copies. Ultimately, they are a practical thing. And also for a lot of content creators, especially the bigger ones, free product won't sway them. Review copies aren't gonna convince anybody to give a good review if they're actually making a career out of this. And just to address your point on price, I do think that it is a massive problem in this hobby. I know it's talked about often, but I don't think the gravity of how critically bad it is for miniature wargaming has really been discussed enough, or it's not appreciated enough. And for a lot of reviewers, they do get these things for free, so they need to really hark on and maintain a little bit of perspective of what it would be like to actually pay the money for the product that they have in their hands. I often watch reviewers who kind of shrug off the price, which is just a huge problem. It's a massive problem, because I don't shrug off the price. I have to buy these things, and I am often put off purchasing products from Games Workshop because explicitly of the price. Especially now, as I believe that the hobby market is going to become far more price sensitive as we enter a recession, as the cost of living crisis continues to bite, as things basically get, unfortunately, worse. And now on to the next comment. Alex Knott says, without the hobbying aspect, wargaming is pretty lifeless and a bit boring. The terrain making, world building, scenario creating, and army painting are what make wargaming. For me, anyway. We're gonna ignore the "for me anyway" bit. There's nothing subjective about these opinions. Everyone's talking an objective fact. So for this one, I agree and disagree. I'm gonna be a little bit of a, I'm gonna walk the line on this one. One of my favorite parts of mini wargaming is the gaming side of things. I love to get a game on the table. I actually fucking love playing mini war games. It's why I play such a wide variety of games. Some people just never game. Often, hobbyists will spend far more time away from the table getting their models ready to game with than actually gaming with them. So as a hobby, there's a lot of investment that goes into mini wargaming, and it's super creative. And most hobbies aren't. Most hobbies are purely consumed. They're just an activity to perform. But for mini wargaming, a lot of the aspects are the act of practicing and creating art, and I think that's really awesome. It's why I'm still here after like 18 years of this stuff. Also, if you're not enjoying the actual game itself, maybe consider that it's the game, not you. Maybe consider there is maybe another mini wargame out there for you that you might enjoy more. Everybody watching Boss Baby? You like movies, you just don't like Boss Baby, okay? Partisan Gamer says, Warhammer Fantasy had a better and more immersive world than Age of Sigmar, and most new Warhammer 40k stuff lacks the darkness that made the universe special. Both were done in the name of better marketability, and I think both made the brands more mediocre. This brings me to my last point. Mediocrity sells, and I hate it. So firstly, on the Warhammer Fantasy versus Age of Sigmar thing, I think my opinion on that is pretty well known at this stage. I mean, if you look at some of the content on the channel, I think you know which side of the fence I'm on. In terms of the new Warhammer 40k stuff lacking the darkness that made the universe special, yes and no. I don't think they have stepped away from the Grimdark a little bit, but I gotta say, the new lore for Chaos Space Marines that I have seen has made me more excited to play Chaos Space Marines than at any other time in the entire history of Warhammer 40k. So maybe at some stage I might talk about that. So I don't know where I fall on that line. I think I need to think about that for a while, but I do agree that there have been changes to Warhammer 40k, and I do think that there has been a lot of sanitization of the setting. And yes, that was done to make the game, the brand, really, the IP, more marketable. And I suppose to get to the central point here that mediocrity sells, I'm gonna be a little bit spicy here and say that broadly I do agree. I do agree with you there. I'm not sure I'd say that mediocrity sells so much as blandness sells. Blandness is a good quality to have in a setting or media for a company. Not for us. Because blandness is palatable to a larger group of people, which means there's a bigger market for it. There's just more people to sell to. This is like if you were trying to sell your house, which already is a dream because you own property, well, you're meant to paint all the rooms cream rather than fill the house with snakes. Because sure, there's gonna be some people who really like all the snakes, but there's probably gonna be even more who don't like the snakes, who don't want the snakes to be slithering all over their body. finding ways in through orifices. For those people, it's gonna be a little bit of a deal breaker. Conversely, no one has an opinion on cream walls. They're just not interesting enough to give a single fuck about, so it would swing things either way. And a lot of companies treat media in that way. That a lot of media these days tries to be all things to all people. They would prefer that a lot of their media is inoffensive, and not in a way that they're going out of their way to insult people. I don't mean like that. It's just that they don't want to say anything that anyone could take issue with. They don't want to take a strong stance on anything. And this often leads to media that has no real identity, no real position, no point to it. And in my opinion, that's the death of art. Art has meaning. Art makes you think. Art often doesn't sell well. Artists are notoriously poor. Producers are notoriously rich. Blean Adams says, I think the casual Warhammer 40k experience is the best it's ever been, and my only real problem is the price to play. So that is interesting. I think it would definitely be categorized as an unpopular opinion. I think part of the problem here is we need to ask ourselves, what does the casual 40k experience actually look like? For me, I play Warhammer 40k pretty casually now, and I find it pretty rough. There's a lot going on off the table. There's lots of special rules for your army, tons of different play styles. I mostly play Crusade because I like the idea of playing narrative games, but in practice, I find that it adds a ton of bookkeeping onto the game. And the core game itself already has a ton of bookkeeping. Warhammer 40k has always been like that though. It's always been pretty bookkeeping heavy. A lot of lists and pages need to be destroyed. But I just find that with the amount of stratagems that I have to learn for each of my armies that I have, the fact that the balance has been widely inconsistent between factions, there's a ton of FAQs to remember, or to be honest, ignore, because I have books, not updated PDFs, and I'm not printing them out. I don't have a printer. It means that for me, I struggle playing 40k at a casual level. And to learn all of that stuff would take a ton of time, which I don't really have. And also, there are better games for me to spend my time with, to be perfectly frank. Daniel Logue says, I actually like the GW Battle Box, the 2 army set boxes. I like the narrative campaign and treat them like self-contained games without expanding to huge armies. I get this, actually. I totally get this. I would be way happier if those battle boxes were actually designed to be playable experiences straight out of the box, with 2 relatively balanced forces and all the special rules, all the army rules required for play. Right now, you get all the stats for the units in those boxes with the box, but none of the special rules. Why not? Why none of the special rules? Throw in some dice, throw in some special scenarios like they do right now, and I think that could be a ton of fun. And I think it would be really accessible for casual players. And it would actually be a great onboarding tool set for people to get their friend into the game if it was treated a little bit more like a board game, meant to be everything you needed inside the box. Right now, I don't think the boxes do that very well, and I don't even know if that's really their purpose. I think their purpose really is just to get more money out of established gamers. But in theory, the format that they have right now could be tweaked to be a really awesome experience. So I kind of agree. I do kind of agree. I think it just needs a little more push in that direction. Wintermute says, competing in a competitive environment is the absolute worst way to play 40k. 40k is best played in a smaller narrative style campaign amongst friends, almost in a quasi-RPG way. Also, throughout the 40k tabletop wargame rules, they are archaic garbage. So we already touched on competitive play, we're not going to go over that here. Also, throughout the 40k tabletop wargame rules, they are archaic garbage. Famously, Rick Priestley, the designer of the Warhammer 40k rule set, left Games Workshop because he wasn't allowed to innovate on the core rule system. So yeah, definitely it's behind the times for sure. Games Workshop have started to innovate a little, like the new Kill Team, for example, takes a lot of mechanics from existing skirmish war games. Horus Heresy takes the reaction system that we've seen before in a game like Infinity, for example. A bit, come on, a bit. But as for the most interesting part here, I think, is that 40k is best played as a smaller narrative game. I actually disagree with that. And I know that this is actually a very unpopular opinion. Many people think that Warhammer works as a narrative game. I don't. I get the impression that Warhammer has kind of coasted on being the only game in town for a narrative wargaming experience for many people. But these days, that's not true anymore. There are games coming out now that are explicitly designed to be played as a narrative experience, and they do it so much better than Warhammer. There are dozens of cooperative skirmish war games that have come out that I think facilitate roleplay just a ton better. I think they offer a lot more potential. And honestly, I think that any adversarial game where it's me against you across the table will struggle to be a fun narrative experience for everybody involved. I think if you're gonna make a narrative-based player versus player game, then the rules need to really support that. That needs to be their overall focus. And I'm not convinced that Warhammer 40k does that very well. Phew! Okay, so that was a lot of questions. I'm pretty sure that I didn't even get through like half of them. But if you're curious about my response to actively hateful messages aimed directly at me, check out this video here, where I go through a Reddit thread with the help of a bottle of wine. And a big thanks to Steven Jackson, Sonic Bread, and Beauregard Quitman. Thank you so much for your support, and a big thanks to all my patrons. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!